Hi, my name is Jersusha and I'm a producer from Insight. Recently, I travelled to Hong Kong to find out why teachers are quitting in record numbers and what's changed about its education system since the national security law came into effect. After the 2019 protests, in which youths led the charge, the NSL was passed by the Chinese government to prevent a repeat of events. This also led to an overhaul in the education system. One of the things that came under the spotlight was the subject of liberal studies, or LS, equivalent of social studies in other places. The Chinese government believed that this textbook, taught to all secondary school Hong Kong students aged 15 to 18, contributed to social movements that led to unrest over the years. This subject was introduced in 2009 and students were able to have open critical discussions on Hong Kong and China. After the NSL was invoked in 2019, liberal studies was replaced with Citizenship and Social Development, or CSD, and this became the new textbook used in schools. The curriculum prioritizes fostering a sense of strong national identity towards China. Teachers told us that they could only talk about the positives.
其實覺得可惜啦，嗰個原因係咧，過去通識教科咧，容許老師咧去安排好多唔同嘅教材啦，去同學生討論時事議題啦。咁但係公民與社會發展科而家個變化就係咧好單一，係要求老師咧就跟翻教育局提供嘅教科書嚟去講香港又好，內地又好，都只能夠講個正面發展嘅啫，就唔能夠再講負面。
A survey by the Federation of Education Workers, the largest teachers' union in Hong Kong, found that 71% of 263 teachers surveyed supported the reforms. In this video, we're going to look at what's changed between the LS and CSD curricula. Each curriculum is covered in several volumes of textbooks that span topics from international relations to discussing Hong Kong society and its place in the world. But we'll only be looking at the first volumes, focusing on Hong Kong. And already there's one obvious difference. The LS book is titled Hong Kong Today, and the CSD textbook is titled Hong Kong Under One Country, Two Systems. To make things easier, I'll refer to LS as the old textbook and CSD as the new textbook. I'll also be using the English language version that's used by about a third of the secondary school students in Hong Kong. Aside from the title, the next difference that's obvious to spot, the content pages. The old textbook has three overarching themes: quality of life in Hong Kong, rules of socio-political participation, and a sense of identity. And you can see the type of critical thinking questions raised for discussion. For example, are Hong Kong students unhappy? Is there a decline in press freedom in Hong Kong? Does civil disobedience conflict with the rule of law? The new textbook zooms in straight away on topics of law, national security, the constitutional principle of one country, two systems. These topics account for nearly 2/3 of the book. And questions that students are encouraged to think about more are: what is the significance of Hong Kong's return to China? How can Hong Kong safeguard national security? How can the national security law promote Hong Kong's long-term development? This change suggests a shift in the subject's focus to national security, identity, and patriotism. The old textbook, which describes Hong Kong as a society of immigrants, states that while Hong Kong residents have multiple identities, they take pride in being Hong Kong people. It describes sense of identity as an abstract concept that can be shown through feelings and responses towards things and major events, such as feeling excited when Hong Kong's flag flies over sporting grounds or manifested in social and political activism. The new textbook doesn't mention the Hong Kong identity. Instead, identity is presented as nationality, meaning one's legal identity that belongs to a particular nation, which in this case is China, not Hong Kong. There's also an emphasis on Chinese culture and tradition and its influence on Hong Kong. As we know, Hong Kong was under British rule from 1842 to 1997. The old textbook clearly acknowledges this part of Hong Kong's history and how the colony was influenced by Western culture. But the new textbook argues that the concept of a colony didn't apply to Hong Kong. It asserts that Hong Kong has been part of China since ancient times and that the British occupation did not affect its status as part of China. It also emphasizes that China did not recognize the treaties imposed on it that led to British rule in Hong Kong. The old old LS textbook included critical discussions about the Chinese government and its policies. Such criticisms were omitted in the new textbooks. Here are some examples of what you won't find now. References to Western criticism of China's lack of progress in constitutional rights, human rights, and free speech. Significant events like the 1989 military crackdown on student-led protests at Tiananmen Square and the worldwide reaction that followed. The activism of government critics like Liu Xiaobo, Tan Zuoren, and Zhao Lianhai, as well as how Hong Kong residents demonstrated against their imprisonment. Hong Kong is governed based on the one country, two systems principle, which provides for Hong Kong to retain its own economic and administrative systems, even as there is only one China. The old textbook acknowledges this principle enshrined in law, while at the same time, it also highlights the idea of Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong with a high degree of autonomy. The new textbook, however, states the need for patriots to administer Hong Kong as the core of one country, two systems. It defines a patriot as someone who respects China, supports China resuming control of Hong Kong, and doesn't want to impair Hong Kong's prosperity and stability. In the old textbook, national symbols are only briefly covered, with just one chapter featuring an image of the Chinese and Hong Kong flags displayed side by side. It also cites a controversy over one incident where Hong Kong sports fans booed the national anthem. The new textbook's section on national symbols of the PRC spans a substantial 11 pages, all of it underlining the importance of respect for these symbols. It goes into great detail on, for instance, how the Hong Kong regional flag should always be smaller, placed lower than the national flag. The etiquette for playing and singing the national anthem, where the national emblem can be used, and the penalty for insulting the national symbols. It's emphasized that all this is aimed at promoting patriotism. If you remember, socio-political participation was one of the main themes of the old textbook, covering roughly 1/3 of it. It explains in detail how Hong Kong residents could get involved in such movements. They could join political parties, take part in policy study groups to help influence policy, join NGOs, or use social media to voice demands and influence public opinion. The old textbook recognizes that the rule of law has limitations and not all social problems can be resolved through the rule of law. It says when legal solutions fall short in addressing societal problems, there are people who will resort to non-violent civil disobedience to raise awareness of injustices. The new textbook doesn't mention any of the ways that Hong Kong residents can participate in socio-political movements. In fact, it spends almost 2/3 of the book talking about safeguarding national security and the rule of law. A small section asserts that while Hong Kong residents have the freedom and right to express their views and take part in political and social affairs, these rights are not absolute. There are restrictions in place to ensure that the exercise of these individual rights doesn't harm the interests of others or of society. These are just some of the curriculum changes. There are more, of course, and it's got many Hong Kong teachers pretty upset.
We have to revise all teachers' materials whether will there be any potential to violate national security law. One by one, module by module, chapter by chapter. So horrible.
咁啊，如果係照版傳，照版住會跟住個教科書內容去講，咁當然就係100% 安全啦。咁但係個問題就始終學生有陣時可能問老師意見，咁如果拿捏得唔好，會唔會被學生成為一個告發嘅對象呢？
As a result of the unhappiness, over 12,000 teachers have left the force since 2021. This follows the general mass emigration of Hong Kongers since 2019, which means fewer students, and about 100 kindergartens had to close down or merge. About 19 secondary schools also face high risk of closure. But some people I spoke to are in favour of the CSD subject.
We have to nurture our students to be not just Hong Kong citizens, it's also Chinese citizens. They must learn about their country, history, the present situation, also the governing parties. If the education is successful, they will become patriotic.
When everything's settled down, all the teachers in Hong Kong, I guess most of them will share the same view, same political stand. That's a good thing for Hong Kong. When all these arguments, pros are gone, so Hong Kong will be, on a new stage, and then we can move on.
What is a bit worrying is that schools have to make do with less experienced young teachers who have yet to prove their capability in a school environment.
When the experienced teacher has been left, I let a mentor. I have to face the problem myself.